Inception was released in 2010, is written and directed by Christopher Nolan and stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Tom Hardy, Ellen Page, Michael Caine, and loads of other people as well. And the plot for Inception is, well, I mean, if you've been living under a rock for 10 years, then you pretty much know what the plot for Inception is. I mean, it's Inception. Everyone knows what Inception is. And the main reason I've been wanting to do a review for this movie is for two very specific reasons. One, the movie recently hit its 10th anniversary, which makes me feel very old. But the other reason is that it is one of my favourite movies probably ever, and I've been wanting to talk about it for quite some time now. But obviously I couldn't do this alone. I had to talk about it with someone else. And similar to the Social Network review, which I did a few months ago, I am talking about Inception with a friend of mine, Sawyer. Say hello.
Hello. Thank you again for having me. Really happy to be here.
So, as you're all aware, Inception is one of, if I think, Christopher Nolan's most well-known and beloved movies, alongside the Dark Knight trilogy and Memento. And like I said, I've been wanting to talk about this movie for such a long time because I've watched it about 3 or 4 times now over the years, and I was, again, quite surprised to find out, similar to when we talked about the Social Network, is that, again, this is Sawyer's first time watching Inception. So I'm going to start off by saying, seeing that this was the first time you ever saw it, I'd be interested to know what you thought of it, Sawyer, especially considering that we have like 2 differing perspectives. I've seen it God knows how many times, and this is your first viewing. So what did you think of the film?
Well, first off, I was really it was one of those movies that I've been wanting to watch for a while, because I mean, as you see, I even have the DVD, and also I was really prepared to watch it. But I knew some key moments, because of spoilers, and since it's been out for so long, that happens. Like, I knew of specific moments. I knew of specific plot beats. So I was kind of pushing it off. But when I saw that, it's his 10th anniversary, and I asked the idea to you, and you're like, that's you've been wanting to do it, like you said. And I'm like, this might be as good a time as any, like Social Network. They're both had their anniversaries this year, which really shows what great of a year 2010 really was. 2 of these big movies in 2010. But I was like, why not? So I watched it with my dad, and yeah, I could see why people really love and talk about this movie. It's really good. It's really good.
No, I'm glad to hear that you liked it and you eventually got round to watching it, because I feel like it's one of those movies that could fall into that category of being a bit overhyped, and I do feel like over the 10-year span that since it's been released, I do know some people do refer to it as slightly overrated, which I can understand. As much as I love the movie, I can kind of understand the label that's been kind of plastered on this film as being overrated, because when the movie came out, everyone would not shut up about this movie, and I didn't actually see this film in the cinema. The first time I saw it was on DVD about a few months after it initially came out, so I was a bit late to the party, but I did actually end up seeing it the year it came out. And from the first time I watched it, I instantly fell in love with it, because there's just so much to appreciate about this film, from a filmmaking perspective to the intricacy of the plot to the acting. There's just so much to talk about. I don't quite know exactly where we should start.
Oh, well, I mean, before we get into the film, I think we could talk about the aspects going in, because going in, hearing about this film, I heard it was really just my interpretation of it, so that's pretty much the reputation for people that don't know about it. It's really thought-provoking, really an intellectual type of film, and all that type of stuff. So when I was thinking it was all like that, I was like, I'm impressed that this movie made, I heard it made over $800 million. It's lots of general going audience and casual fans and all went to see a mind-thinking, really interesting movie like this, and it got a lot of award nominations too. I think it was his first Nolan's first film to get a Best Picture nod because The Dark Knight didn't for some reason. But I was like, just the impact it had and all was also another factor in the why I wanted to see it. And of course, the cast. Like, I was blown away because even my dad, who doesn't really know actors like that, he's like, I know that person from somewhere. That guy's from there.
Yeah, this is an idea that I think Christopher Nolan had been working on for about 10 years before he actually got round to making it. Like, he'd had the script. I remember seeing an interview about this. I think he had the script in like a drawer, just constantly coming back to it throughout that 10-year span, just constantly adding new things and adding different ideas to this script that he was so passionate about. And I think, like, out of all the films that he's made, this idea is the one that has kind of stuck with him the most, and is one that he was wanting to make since he got into filmmaking. And you can kind of tell by watching the movie that, like, this is definitely Nolan at his most, like, playful when it comes to filmmaking. Like, this is my idea, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want with it, and that I don't care if that alienates anyone or if that, you know. But you can definitely tell he's making the most of what is at his disposal. And apparently, one thing I found out is that they finished production on this film so quick that they still had a lot of the budget left to use. Like, they didn't use up all the budget, and they still had a few months left on the schedule for filming, but they'd already done everything. Like, that's how well and how intricate he knew he wanted to do this idea. Like, he knew that idea back to front, and he knew exactly how he wanted to do it, and got it done quicker than I think everyone was expecting. Because, again, when you watch the film and see how intricate and how complex the plot actually is, and the fact that it fits together all so perfectly, is just really impressive. And the fact that he'd been writing it for 10 years kind of shows, because this does feel like a passion project of Nolan's.
And for the company Warner Bros. To, like, continuously allow him to do these type of films like this, Interstellar, the new Tenet that will come out sometime in the future probably. Yeah, I just, like, it's like Warner Bros. Knows what they have with this director, because, like, he can put, like, I mean, I think what let them let him do this type of movie is, since he did so well with their, you know, the Dark Knight series, and made them so much money and they were really well done, they're like, we'll reward you with this movie. I think that's how that went down.
And that just kind of shows how, like, he's kind of gained the company's trust over the course of just a short period of time. Because I know most other directors would love to make something, you know, their passion project right away, but they've kind of got to earn it, so to speak. But you can see the evolution that Christopher Nolan's gone on, especially during the 2000s, where he started off with, like, small little independent films like Memento and following, and then as he made more films, he kind of gradually evolved and gained the trust of the company to be able to make his passion project, which is Inception. And I do feel like Inception is like, when you watch the film and you compare it to the films he made before it, it does feel like a culmination of everything he'd made before, because it's got, like, the artistic and art house and experimental aspects of, like, his earlier films like Memento, but it's got that big epic blockbuster scope to it that the Dark Knight trilogy has. And I feel like it's a perfect blend of those two styles, and it never goes too far in one of the two directions. It never feels too artsy and experimental, but it never feels too cliched and blockbustery. It kind of rides that very thin line of being able to do both, which I think is why a lot of people gravitated towards it when it came out, because it kind of merged those two different fan bases together. Hence why it is one of his most beloved films, because it's very experimental, especially in terms of its story, but it does feel like you're watching a very well-made action blockbuster.
And I really, like, speaking on the story, I really do like how there's, like, some really good twists and, like, really interesting developments that happen in the story, especially near the end, that just keeps people, like, questioning, like, what's real and what's not. And just, like, I really do appreciate that, because I think people still theorize on the ending, which I mean I won't really dive into, but like for people to still be talking about the ending on if it's a dream or not all these years later just really shows how well crafted the movie is. And also I just want to say that score I mean it's so like blaring and loud. It's really great. I really like that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think the score for Inception is definitely one of my favorite scores, definitely of the 2010s, because it's one of those scores where as soon as you hear it, you immediately think of Inception. Whereas I feel like most other scores that would be made for a film similar to this, you would just kind of, it just kind of, oh, that music could go with any action film. But the music is so synonymous with Inception and like those blaring horns that now become a trope of every action movie trailer. Which is probably one of the only downsides with the film, is the fact that this started the whole, trend of, let's do a massive wah sound effect whenever that we do the trailer for a film. But no, the score is brilliant. The cast are all fantastic. I wouldn't say this is one of my favourite Leonardo DiCaprio performances, but it really does work for the sake of the film, in my opinion. And the whole cast in general, especially that main group of characters that you are having to work with for the whole film. I really like the chemistry that they have.
Yeah, and I really like how like every person, like how in some big movies or something, like people are just there for the ride and they have no purpose in some movies. And here though, I think everyone, like even pretty much everyone has something to do and they're constantly like achieving. The guy who's driving has to make sure that everyone else in the car is fine while they're going deeper and deeper. And then Joseph Gordon-Levitt with the hallway stuff, which I thought was really like, was that like visuals, like with the hallways flipping around, or was that like practical set? Because I thought that was really good.
That whole scene, which is probably, like, I know it sounds like a cliche at this point, but that is probably my favourite scene in the whole film. That was entirely practical.
Wow.
They basically they built the hallway, put it on its side, and basically built it around like this cylinder axis that kept rotating, and they just kind of shoved the camera up through the middle of it, pointing upwards. While Joseph Gordon-Levitt and the other stunt guy were on wires.
Wow!
So the fact that whole scene is practical, and like a lot of the effects in this movie are practical. I think the only CGI shot in the film, outside of the shot of like the buildings falling apart at the end of the film, I think the only other majorly CGI shot is obviously when Paris folds in on it.
Yeah, I was
about halfway through the film.
I was like, whoa, that's some great practical effects. It's so funny.
But yeah, that thing was practical. The van going over the bridge actually apparently was the longest bit to shoot for the entire film. Like it took them 3 months, I think, to get the whole scene right. And there's one aspect to this film that I don't think gets enough credit, but is like one fundamental thing that is in this film that has to make it work. Or otherwise, if it wasn't there, I don't think the film would work as well. And the whole aspect of diving deeper into the dreams. And that is the whole aspect of like, whatever happens in the first dream, the logic of that dream has to then carry over into the second one, if that makes any sense. For example, whenever the guy driving the van hits like a speed bump, it affects what happens in the second one and whatever happens in the second. I like those little details. And I don't know, it's just something that has to be there for the sake of the film in general to work. And it's such a small little detail and things like that. But I just really love the intricacy of it all. And I suppose this leads on to a similar thing we were talking about with the cast working really well, is you've got so many different things happening all at once, but it never feels cluttered. That's one thing he does in The Dark Knight very well, where you've got loads of characters and loads of different plot points doing different things, but it never feels complicated. And I feel like it works even better in Inception, because you've got to focus on what each character is doing, especially when you get to the heist itself. You've got to focus on what each character's doing in each dream. And it never feels complicated. Well, at least I never found it that complicated or that hard to follow. I don't know how you felt about that, but I think it's something that feels very well-rounded in Inception in regards to, we've got a massive group of characters, but we're going to give each character the time they need and never go over that or under that. And I thought each character got the right amount of screen time, and, you know, I thought that whole aspect is probably at its best in Inception.
Yeah, like, I mean, I thought the movie would be a lot more, you know, confusing, more thought-provoking. So I was really surprised. Like, I mean, it was still, like, it was an interesting, you know, thinking and stuff, but, like, it wasn't, like, really, like, deep and intellectual and really hard to follow. Like, I was, like, that's what I thought with people and how they speak of it. It's not that hard to follow when you're, like, into the story.
Because there's always a sense of urgency with what is going on. I feel like that is what keeps you engaged and kind of pushes the story forward, hence why it doesn't feel that complicated. Because there is so much going on, and there is constantly something happening to keep you engaged. You're constantly always kind of trying to see what happens next, which is why I think the story is as easy to follow as much as it is complicated, because I do feel Inception is one of those movies where when you watch it the first time, you get the general gist of it, but with more rewatches, you start to understand the deeper layers and the intricacies of the story a bit more, because I think I've seen it about 3 or 4 times now, and it just becomes a whole lot more clearer with each viewing. Even though I did fully understand what the main gist of the movie was on that first viewing, I feel like by the time you get to the second and third viewing, you really do understand certain aspects a lot more. Like, for example, the whole aspect of the film with Cobb and his wife, that whole aspect becomes a lot clearer in, like, future viewings, because when I first watched it, that was the only aspect of the film I didn't quite understand, but then, like, on the second and third viewing, it fully made more sense and how it all fit together, and just certain things like that, and the whole thing with Saito and where he's left at the end, all those aspects, and again with, like, the very last shot of the movie, all of it is what it's one of those movies where it just makes sense the more you watch it, and the more you think about it as well, you can kind of piece things together a bit more. So considering that this was your first viewing, and I want to know more as to what you thought about it, was there anything that you maybe didn't like about the film, or that didn't quite sit well with you? Because at this point in time, it's one of my favourite films, and I love almost everything about it. But I'm interested to see if there was anything that you maybe had issues with just from your first viewing alone.
That's the thing. It's like, I mean, it's so hard. Like, these are such good movies that we've talked about so far, and it's really hard to find a flaw. Like, if I had to say something that was kind of a negative throughout, was the development of the wife. They don't really give, I mean, that much info about it, but what it explains in the story later actually makes up for the loss of development info about her throughout the movie. So it kind of saves itself, but that's like a critique there. And maybe the thought on it, you know, being like what happened with the ending, kind of, it's, I mean, a lot of people I know hate endings that aren't like fully definitive and like ambiguous. I'm fine if it wants to do that and all, but sometimes it does. I don't like that. I like a conclusion for my stories, but I'm not gonna downgrade them. I'm just spitballing on parts that I may not like, because it's really hard with this type of movie. Because I really liked this movie. It was really good.
Yeah, those are very valid points, especially for like coming away from your first viewing of it, because like I said a minute ago, when I first saw this movie, the whole aspect with Cobb's wife, I understood why it was there, but I feel like it didn't justify why it was there. But then when you watch it like a second and third time, or when you think about it a bit more, and you understand that she's only there for a specific reason and nothing else, it kind of makes a bit more sense, if that if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But no, I do completely get what you mean, because that is an issue that I had with the film upon first viewing, and I loved this movie the first time I saw it. But that was the one aspect I was like, I do kind of get why that's there, but I also kind of don't at the same time. Yeah, no, I can understand where you're coming from, especially from a first viewing anyway, because those are similar things that I thought about the film when I first saw it. But trust me when I say that in about a month's time, you'll still be thinking about this film. And those aspects of the movie will just either get better or just kind of linger with you a lot more as time goes on. Because like I said, I first saw this movie back in 2010 on DVD, and even though I've watched it a few more times since, it's always a movie that keeps popping back up in my head, where like I'll just be doing something random and then I'll kind of be like, yeah, I feel like watching Inception again, just for the hell of it. It's that good of a movie, in my opinion. But yeah, I know it's a bit of a cliched thing now to say that this is, one of my favourite films, because I feel like everyone goes to this movie as one of their favourites. But it genuinely is, because I loved it from the first time I saw it. It's just improved over time, and almost every aspect of the film, whether it's the whole cast being as brilliant as they are, the script being as intricate as it is, Hans Zimmer's score, the editing, which I also think is probably some of the best editing in any Christopher Nolan movie. Because especially editing that last hour of the movie when they actually do the heist, you've got to get that editing just right, or otherwise the whole point of it just kind of falls apart, if that makes sense. But I feel like the whole movie is edited perfectly, and that last hour or so where they're actually in the heist going into the deeper dreams. But I mean, I'm quite happy giving this a 10. I mean, that's just me. I'm quite happy giving it a 10. It's one of my favourite films. I've loved it since it came out. What would you give it as your final rating?
I'll agree with you. I'm gonna give it a 10 as well.
And like I said, it's one of those films where and again, because you've only just seen it for one viewing, you'll love it now, but I bet you it's one of those movies that will just improve as time goes on. And I love those kind of films. A movie that you watch just once and doesn't leave an impact, I see those kind of movies all the time. But a movie like this that sticks with you for years and years after you've seen it just kind of shows how brilliant it actually is as a movie. Anyway, it was really nice to talk about this brilliant movie with you, Sawyer. Is there anything you want to say before we end the video?
Just thanks again for having me. I like I said, it's really hard for me to get into collabs with people, so I'm always happy to come back. And yeah, follow me on Twitter if you want. Sawyer Sabol, or at Sabol Sawyer. That's my current name and stuff. And if you want to check out any of my videos or something, I also do movie reviews and stuff. Yeah.
Cool. You pretty much just taken what I was about to say. If you want to subscribe to Sawyer, then please do. He's a great channel. It was really great to finally talk about Inception. Like I said, I've been wanting to do this for ages, and now the fact that I've actually been able to do that with someone who loves the movie as much as I do is great. So yeah, if you like the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. See you in the next one, guys. Bye.
Bye.